So this video is the opposite from the last video, which was converting decimals to fractions. So in this video, we're going to take a fraction and we are going to convert it into a decimal. This is a slightly more complicated process than the last one, but the good news is you actually have two options as to go about converting it. So let's take a look at option number one. Now, full disclosure, with option number one, it will not always work, and I'll show you how you'll know if it will work or not. So with option number one, step one, right away you'll be able to determine if it will work or not. So step number one is you need to see if you can make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, etc. So to give you an example, here I have the fraction 1/5. So can I take 1/5 and give it a denominator of 10, 100, 1,000? And the answer is yes, because I can take 5 and multiply it times 2 to give me a bottom or a denominator of 10. And then I just multiply the top with 2 as well. So option number one would work for me. Now, if I had the fraction 1/3, this would not work for me because no matter what I multiply the denominator by, it will never give me a denominator of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, etc. And so you would know right away that it would not work and you need to move on to option number two, which we'll get to in just a minute. So let's continue on with option number one. So once you have your equivalent fraction, which is 2/10, then what you do is you put it into word form. So how do you say this fraction? 2/10, okay? 2/10. Now, write it as a decimal. 2/10, 0.2. And then that's all there is to it. Now again, remember with option number one, it will not work for every single fraction, and so we'll move on to option number two. And this is just a little visual again of option number one. So 5/10 would look like this, 72 hundredths would look like 0.72, 638 thousandths, again would add in the thousandths place. Okay, now option number two will always, always, always work. So if you don't like option number one, you can just always stick with option number two. With option number two, you are essentially doing a division problem with decimals. So if that was a strong suit of yours, then you're in the right place. Okay, so let's take a look here. What you're going to do, it's really a one-step problem. You are just going to simply divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay, so here you have the fraction 1/2, and you need to make it a decimal. Okay, so you are going to turn it this way. Okay, and the numerator is going to go inside the fraction bracket, and the denominator is going to go outside. So 2 goes into 1 0 times. 0 times 2 is 0. Subtract. 1 minus 0 is 1. I have nothing to bring down, so I'm going to add a decimal, bring it to the roof, add a 0, and bring it down. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. Subtract. 10 minus 10 is 0. I have now a remainder, and you do need to keep going until you get a remainder, and so your answer here is 0.5. And so 1/2 is the same as 0.5. Okay, and again, that will work for every single one. All right, so let's look at this from a couple different vantage points here. So what fraction of the triangles are colored in? Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are colored in out of 7, 8, 9, 10 total. So 7/10 are colored in. Write this fraction in word form, 7/10. And then how do we write 7/10 as a decimal? 0.7. And again, that's working with something pretty easy that already has a tenths or hundredths or thousandths at the bottom. Okay, let's take a look at a different example. What fraction of the triangles are colored in? 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, write this in word form. 4/10, And then how do we write that as a decimal? 0.4. But let's get into some slightly more complicated situations where that won't always work. Now, here we have 1 over 10. Now, that will work for option number 1. So that will be 1/10. How do you write that in word form? 1/10, which is 0.1. Okay. Now, this guy here, 4/20ths. If you look at the bottom, 4/20ths, that can become a 10 or a 100 or a 1,000 and on and on and on. Now, if you get super creative and you look at it, you'll notice that it can reduce to 2/10ths, but we can also make it up to 100. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom times 5. So that's going to give us 20 over 100. We're going to write that in word form. 20 over 100. 20 hundredths. And so that's going to look like this. Okay, which is also the same as this right here, which is 2/10, because you can also drop the 0. Okay, now with 5 over 8, you cannot take 8 and make it into a 10 or 100 or 1,000. It just won't work. So we're going to have to divide. And so we're going to take it and we're going to turn it this way and we're going to make it into a division problem. So the 5 is going to go inside the bracket. The 8 is going to go out on the outside and we're going to divide. 8 goes into 5 0 times. 0 times 8 is 0. Subtract 5 minus 0 is 5. Put a decimal point, bring it to the roof, add a 0, bring it down. Okay, 8 goes into 50. Let's see, 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract. 50 minus 48 is 2. Add a 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 20, 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract. 20 minus 16 is 4. Add a 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 40, 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. Subtract. 40 minus 40 is 0. So our answer here is 0.625. So 5/8 is the same as 0.625. All right, let's take a look at these here. So 3 over 4 also cannot change itself into a 10. It can go into 100, but I'm going to do it the division way just for some practice. So I'm going to turn it on its side this way. So the 3 is going to go into the division bracket with the 4 on the outside, and we're going to divide. So 4 goes into 3 0 times. 4 times 0 is 0. We're going to subtract. 3 minus 0 is 3. Add a decimal point, bring it to the roof, add a 0, and bring it down. 4 goes into 30, 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. Subtract. 30 minus 28 is 2. Add a 0, bring it down. 4 goes into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. Subtract. 20 minus 20 is 0. So your answer here is 0.75. Okay. We're going to do this guy over here. Now I know a lot of you may be thinking, well, that's an easy one to change into 100, and it is, but just for practice I am going to do the division problem. Okay. So the 2 is going to go inside the bracket, the 50 on the outside. All right. So 50 goes into 2. 0 times, okay? So 0 times 50 is 0, and I'm going to subtract. 2 minus 0 is 2. Add a decimal, bring it to the roof. Add a 0, bring it down. 50 goes into 20, 0 times. 0 times 50 is 0. Bring down the 20. Add a 0, bring it down. 50 goes into 200 4 times. 4 times 50 is 200. Subtract and you get 0. So the answer here is 0.04. All right, let's try this last one here. 9/6. Okay, so we're going to turn it on its side here and divide. So 6 on the outside, 9 on the inside. You may be thinking, well, the bigger number always goes on the outside. That's not true. This is an improper fraction. The numerator always goes inside. Important to remember. Okay, so 6 goes into 9 one time. 1 times 6 is 6. So let's go ahead and subtract. 9 minus 6 is 3. Add a decimal point, bring it to the roof, add a 0, and bring it down. 6 goes into 30 5 times. 5 times 6 is 30. Subtract, and you end up with 0. So the answer to this one is 1.5. All right, that is the end of our conversion from fraction to decimals. Again, we are going to do a ton more examples in class.